All right, when it comes to testing my trigger, I like to have a game plan as well. It's important to predict the key scenarios your trigger must run successfully on. What scenarios do I need to test to have confidence that my trigger works? The last thing you want is to deploy something in production and later find out that you forgot to account for a certain scenario. It's especially bad if the error comes up during a normal day-to-day work. I'm not even talking about edge cases here. Believe me, it's not fun. I still stress out over past coding failures of mine. Anyway, there are at least 3 scenarios we need to account for. The first scenario is that a lead is created and there are no contact matches. This is a scenario that's easy to overlook. The trigger focuses on the logic that happens when a match is found, so you naturally want to think about those scenarios. In reality though, a no match scenario is probably the most common scenario, and thus it's the most critical. The next scenario is that a lead is created and there's exactly 1 contact match. This is the scenario that I expect most people to identify because it's the most straightforward. The last scenario is that there is more than 1 contact match. Now, why is this a separate scenario than when there's exactly 1 contact match? Well, we had to make special considerations in our code to make sure it worked when there were multiple matches. For example, we stored our matching contacts results in a list, not a single contact S object. Also later on, we loop through all our contact matches and print each one out in our lead description. It's possible that we coded our trigger in a way where it would flawlessly work when there's exactly 1 match and fail when there's more than 1 match. I hope I'm not sounding too paranoid right now, but I promise you that being paranoid is a good trait when coding. Anyway, at one point in my career, I was on a QA team. This kind of exercise is exactly what my entire job revolved around. This is one of those examples of how simply having knowledge of coding can help you in tasks that don't really require coding at all. That's one of the reasons why I believe developers generally understand Salesforce much better than admins do. Okay, let's run our 3 test scenarios in Salesforce. First, I'll create a lead that I know has 0 contact matches. I expect the lead to save normally, and it does. Good. Next scenario, I'll create a lead that I know for sure has exactly 1 contact match. This time it fails. Excellent. Now to practice our debugging skills. When a failure happens, you often get a big block of red text up here. A lot of people see this text and get intimidated and sometimes even give up. It's easy to assume the text is a bunch of robot gibberish, but it's actually usually really helpful. This information is particularly helpful. We have an error description and the specific line of code where it goes wrong. You can Google this error message to get more info on it, but if you think long and hard, you might be able to figure it out yourself too. Let's look at line 26 in our code. So we have a SOQL related error right here. Row was retrieved without querying the field. This basically means that we tried to access a field that we didn't first query in SOQL. See, our SOQL query only pulls the ID of our matching contacts, but here we're trying to access first name, last name, and even the account name. I'm going to add these fields into our SOQL query and save. Let's try that scenario out again. This time, it works. Notice that the lead owner has changed and the dupe info has been added to our description. Previous info in the description field is still preserved. Let's test our final scenario now, multiple matches. I'm going to create a lead that I know has multiple contact matches. I want to make sure that all matches are identified in the lead's description, and it sure looks like that's the case here. Since we made code changes after testing our 0 match scenario, it'd be a good idea to retest that one. I did, and it works. There's another important scenario I want you to get into the habit of testing too. This is basically a universal test scenario that you need to check with any code you write because it's the most common error of all time. What if certain fields are not populated? Take a look at our trigger again. We can basically go line by line down the whole thing and ask ourselves, What if this is null? What if our queue is null because it's not found? What if our lead's email is null because it's not populated? I'm not going to lie to you, I despise this part of coding. Hunting down null pointer exceptions is at the bottom of my bucket list. That said, it is completely necessary and something you're just going to have to do literally every time you write code. I repeat, every time you write code. Okay, let's fix our potential null data quality queue first. If this SOQL query doesn't find anything, we're gonna have a problem. We chose to use the single SObject shortcut here, and you're really only supposed to use that when you're sure there's exactly one match. But in this case, there could be 0 matches, and Apex doesn't like that. So let's change this back to a list, keeping our limit 1 in it. I still want our trigger logic to run if we don't have a data quality queue. I just won't reassign the lead owner. So I'll add an if statement to only change the lead owner if we have a data quality queue. Next error, what if our lead email is null? It wouldn't make any sense to do anything in this trigger if our lead's email is null. So I'll wrap all our core logic in an if statement, preventing it from running if our email is null. Lastly, I'll fix the potential null lead description at the bottom as well. You guessed it, it needed an if statement. And now, finally, after re-verifying our test scenarios, our trigger is complete.